Hello and welcome to the second episode of Decoding the Game. My name is Nils Pihl,
And I'm Ryan Braley.
and we're the founders of Mention. And today we're going to discuss a question that was sent to us by Gustav at the Blekinge Technical College. He wants to know, are the points in Tetris rewards? And Ryan, I know that this is a question that we both feel very passionately about.
Absolutely. It's one of the gems of the questions of game design.
Right, it really cuts to the core about what is good game design really about. And we've been involved in several arguments online with gamification proponents, for example. And I would like to start right off the bat with declaring my position that points are not rewards, and I'd like to prove it with an experiment.
Okay, so let's take the experiment of a game that only has points. So, can we have a button to get points that will give us 1,000,000 points? How many times would you play that game?
I don't think I'd play that game very long at all.
But it would be the best game ever. You'd get 1,000,000 points.
Well, if we assume that points are rewarding, then yes, that would be a fantastic game. So if a game where we press a button for 1,000,000 points is not an engaging game, then the proposition that points are rewarding is under serious threat.
Exactly. But I do have some experience where points were very engaging. So,
Interesting.
when I was teaching game design, when I introduced the ability to add a score and points to my students, they no longer were building their game, they were playing their games.
That's very interesting. And I remember that anecdote. It's actually very interesting. So, what you're saying is that all these people in your classroom that were all designing their own games, they were building the games up until the point where you introduced points, and then they started playing the game instead.
Right. Testing.
Right, testing the game. So, introducing the points had made the game more engaging.
Right. So we need to be able to explain that as well.
Right, but I think we can. And I think the way that we explain that is we look at what is the difference between the first example and the different example. And the difference, of course, is that in the first one, there's no underlying game. In your classroom, all of these people had made games they thought would be engaging. And when you added points, people started playing. And I think if we introduce a definition of a point as a representation of some value, but not the value itself, that starts making sense. Because the reason you want to play a game is because you want to compete with someone, or you want to test yourself, or you want to solve puzzles. And when the points become a visual representation of that, they become engaging.
Right. So what is it that they're actually representing?
Well, I'd like to introduce some new terminology here to help us discuss what's really going on with points. And those are the words currency and token. Ryan, could you give some examples of what currency is?
So currency is what you came for. It's the feeling that you get when you're playing. It's the feeling of feeling accomplishment, or it's a representation of a state of mind.
Right, so it's the sense of achievement, or winning a competition, or feeling social belonging. All those kinds of things are currencies.
Right.
And what then is a token?
A token is a unit of that currency.
Right, so having one new friend on Facebook could be a token of the currency social belonging.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's easy enough to understand. But I think it's very meaningful to try to categorize different currencies as well. And I think a cool place to start showing how versatile different rewards can be is showing the difference between finite and infinite currencies. I know you have a great example about old pinball arcade machines.
Right. So when you remember the old pinball machines, you know that the digits that represent the score had a finite number. You had maybe 9 digits in which to represent your score. So when you were getting to that maximum score, one kind of person, when they reached that maximum score, would be, yes, I finally did it.
I hated that. I
Really?
absolutely
Yeah,
hated that.
me too. I wanted the game to keep going, and
Right.
it was broken because we had reached a maximum score. So there are two different ways to look at that. And one is, if I'm looking for an infinite currency, that means that I don't want the game to end.
So that's cool. So there are two different categories of rewards, of currencies that might appeal to different people. There's another example that I feel is very helpful here, is the 3 people that are going out walking, right?
Right. So they're each doing the same thing. They're each walking. The token is a single step, but they're playing 3 separate games. The first guy, he wants to walk all the way to Mount Everest, and when he gets there, he's won.
Right.
The second person wants to see how far he can walk before he falls down, right?
Okay.
And the third person wants to see, can I walk further than either of them?
Okay. So I would guess then that the first person is playing a finite currency game.
That's a good guess.
When he gets to Mount Everest, he's done.
Right. He's won the game. But what about the second person? See, when at every point, it's always better for him to take another step because he doesn't want the game to end.
Right. Okay. So if I had said that, oh, it's a finite currency game because he can only walk as far as he's got energy to, the counter is that, yeah, but he would have done better at the game if he had walked another step.
Right.
Whereas that doesn't hold true for the first person.
Right. If he went to Mount Everest and then took another step, he'd
That adds
already
nothing.
won.
Right.
Yeah.
That already won.
The third one is a little bit more confusing, though.
It is because he wants to walk further than both of them.
How do you walk further than an infinite currency game?
Right. So intuitively, perhaps I feel like that should be an infinite currency. But I want to submit to you that it's actually a finite currency game because it's the same game as walking to Mount Everest. You just don't know how far away Mount Everest is.
Right.
Right. So as soon as I've walked further than the second guy, I've won.
Right. So it's really two values. I haven't or I have won the game.
Right. So it's actually a finite currency game that I could end up playing infinitely long.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay. Are there other meaningful ways that we could categorize currencies?
Well, we can talk about currencies in terms of instrumental and intrinsic values.
I think actually that might be the most meaningful distinction you can make when looking at currencies because it really boils down to different kinds of behaviors being promoted.
Mm-hmm.
An instrumental currency, of course, is something that we are given so that we can use it for something else. What I mean by that is money, for example, is an instrumental currency because the reason we value money, the reason money has value at all, is because we can trade it for other things.
Unlike points in Tetris.
Yes, I can't use my points in Tetris for anything else. I can't like, hey, Ryan, I'm gonna pay you with 1,000 Tetris points if you mow my lawn. That's not gonna happen. So there's the instrumental, and then there's the intrinsic, the things that we enjoy just because they are. Like we play Sudoku not because we win money when we do, but because it's enjoyable. Mm-hmm. And we eat a chocolate bar not because it has the perfect amount of calories for what we want to do today. We eat the chocolate bar because it tastes good. So that good taste is an intrinsic value.
Right. So I think that when we look at the question, are points in Tetris rewards, we have to fall on the side of no, they're not. But they're
Right.
representations of some intrinsic reward.
In Tetris, they certainly are. In Tetris, the points represent some other reward that the game is able to pay out, of another currency that the game can pay out to you. And that could be, for example, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of puzzle solving, maybe competing with a friend. But I actually think there are some cool predictive things that you can try out when watching people play Tetris. I know that I love watching people play games, right? And one of the things I find when watching people play Tetris is that the people that care about the points, in many versions of Tetris, they will play in a high-risk way. You know, when there are this 4x1 piece, and you've left that perfect slot for it, and it goes down, and you remove 4 rows. In many versions of Tetris, that will pay more points to you than just removing 4 rows one by one. So if you really care about the points, if you want to get a high score, they're more likely to play that way.
But isn't that riskier?
It is riskier, right? So people that wanted to play for a longer time, let's say they're playing a version of Tetris that has a timer and you want to see how far you can go, they might just want to keep removing rows as fast as they can, and they won't engage in the same kind of high-risk behavior. So depending on what you reward here, you can promote different kinds of behavior. And I think that cuts back to what Gustav's original question is about. Are the points rewards? Well, they're not rewards in and of themselves. They're representations of rewards. And depending on what reward there is, that might produce very, very different behaviors within the game environment.
So the lesson for game designers is to make sure that your points represent the right rewards for your players.
That seems like a very good lesson to take home. And I think we'll end the podcast on that note. As usual, I'm Nils, and with me today was...
Ryan Braley.
And we hope to see you again next week. Remember to subscribe to our channel.